And what would you like to have happen?
I'd like to feel like I had better control of my life.
And when you don't have better control of your life, how do you know you don't have better control of your life?
And that's how clean language sounds like. It's not a dialogue nor a discussion, but something different. Let's find out what. Welcome to the retrospective. Let's begin with a bit of history. Back in the 80s, David Grove developed a questioning technique that he called clean language and that he used with trauma patients. He seems to have been a remarkable truth seeker, looking for and synthesizing knowledge from many different disciplines. Then, in the 90s, James Lawson and Penny Tompkins analyzed the way Grove used the questions and, based on their findings, developed a process called symbolic modeling that uses clean language. There are other processes too, like clean space and clean feedback, for example. So now we have established clean language as the means and symbolic modeling as a process. This is what I would call a very good start. About clean questions. What Lawson and Tompkins found was that David Grove used over 20 different kinds of questions, 9 of which he used frequently, and community later found that 2 questions are key since they are used by all practitioners frequently. Central to clean is the use of metaphors as a way to trigger what Grove called psychoactive space. There are a few kinds of metaphors actually, for example the Jungian or Ericksonian, but clean is focused in the epistemological metaphors that originate from the client. Here a few examples of questions that a therapist or a coach could ask cleanly. We can study intention by asking, what would you like to have happen? We can develop a metaphor by asking, what kind of thing is that thing? And we can study sequences by asking, then what happens? Let's hear David Grove explain what's so special about these questions.
So what becomes important is that we ask questions that do not contaminate the client's experience.
So these type of questions are indeed non-contaminating. The facilitator keeps clients' focus in their space, not only via language, but with gestures that go into the client's space. The therapist does not interfere. Staying clean in a therapeutic or coaching situation requires much skill. Listening, whole body expressions, intonation, timing, and also pretty good memory, since part of clean is mirroring back to client what has been said, unchanged and unaltered. Let's challenge this a bit by asking, what if the metaphors are just meaningless noise generated by the brain? Or as Sven Brinkmann criticizes the gut feelings in his book Stand Firm. All of the answers are already within you. Just think about how absurd that actually is. What should we do about climate change? How do you make scones? What's the Chinese for horse? Do I have what it takes to be a good engineer? Although I enjoy many topics in Brinkmann's book, he is actually mixing apples and oranges here. Factual information and reflective information are very different kinds of knowledge. And I would say that engineers, software architects, and agile coaches enjoy zero guidance from society as what constitutes being good in their professions. Making sense who is good and who is not is all heuristics, not factually accurate processing. In terms of metaphors being noise generated by the mind, I must admit that that is a possibility. But since we don't know even how thoughts are generated, I see this kind of argument nonsensical. I mean, I could also ask back, what if your question is just noise? My biggest reservation with clean has to do with its universality. Clean requires facilitators silencing their impulses to ask non-clean questions, hence silencing their own will. The facilitator is there, but without their whole self, or I. But what if the client needs just that? What if they need to experience the presence of presence? A young victim of abuse or adolescent traumatized person, etc. They might need the presence of a real adult as a role model, rather than an empty void. This being or not being thing is a burning question I'm pondering. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe this is not a problem at all. Let's recap. Clean language was developed by David Grove in the 80s. Wider recognition came through Lawley and Tompkins. Clean is really about asking non-contaminating questions. And it uses metaphors that are epistemological, meaning that they originate from the client and not from the therapist. Clean language creates a psychoactive space. Clean language is a multi-purpose tool. It can be used in multiple ways in therapy and coaching. And it requires a process around it, such as symbolic modeling or clean space or something like that. I take clean language as one of the most interesting things I've seen in years, and its effect is potentially huge. Now, let me ask you one thing. What would you like to have happen?